Hi there, freelance friends. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about why every freelancer needs a freelance calculator. And the reason that we're discussing this, because as we've mentioned in previous episodes, one of the biggest challenges that freelancers face, both when they're starting out and when they're experienced, is figuring out how much to charge. It's not just as simple as taking your previous salary from your full-time job and dividing it by the hours worked. And that's because when you're freelancing, you're covering expenses your employer used to handle. Things like health insurance, retirement contributions, taxes, equipment, software, professional development, and unpaid time off. The list goes on and on. Plus, when you are a freelancer, you're not necessarily spending 40 hours a week solely on client work. You also have to build in time that you spend on required admin work, marketing, proposals, invoicing, and all of those other non-billable tasks that keep your business running. Obviously, you have to account for that time. So how do you calculate a rate that actually supports both your life and your business? And this is where I feel like freelance calculators can be incredibly valuable to you. So why on earth would you use a freelance calculator? Well, freelance calculators help you essentially work backward from your financial needs to determine what you should be charging. So instead of guessing or underpricing yourself, you can just input real numbers, things like your desired annual income, the expenses that you acquire with your business, and the number of billable hours that you intend to have. And you'll basically get a data-driven hourly or project rate. So when you are looking for a good freelance calculator, I would think that you would need to consider things that take into account your target annual income so that you can take a look at what you actually need or want to earn in a year. Additionally, business expenses obviously factor in. Things like software, subscriptions, equipment, workspace costs, professional insurance, marketing, and so on. Those things should be taken into account when calculating your rate because inevitably they're expenses that you have to pay that are associated to the business. And then, of course, there's always taxes. You have to think about your self-employment tax, your federal and state income tax. Usually this accounts for 25 to 30% of your income and sometimes even more. And then, as I mentioned, there is that unbillable time. Well, you might work 40 hours a week, but maybe you're only actually billing 20 to 30 of those hours directly to your clients. You're spending the remaining hours on admin, marketing, and business development. However, you're still working, so you should get paid. So those should be factored in. And then there's things like time off and savings and retirement that usually go hand in hand with a full-time job, but you are responsible for as a freelancer. And as a freelancer, we don't get paid for our time off. And the only person who's generally contributing to our savings and retirement is us. So you need to factor in things like vacation days, sick days, holidays, because you're not getting paid for these anymore, but they should be built into your rate. And the similar thing goes with savings in retirement. Contributing to your own retirement fund and building an emergency fund is something that's essential and definitely should be considered. So with all of that said, A freelance calculator that takes all these factors into account and spits out a realistic hourly rate or annual target can be very beneficial because it's removing the guesswork and giving you a foundation to work from. So let's take a look at some specific freelance calculator examples and see how they stack up. So the first one is the Freelance to Founder calculator, and you can see that I did place the URL on the screen, and additionally I will put these URLs in the comments so you can easily access them. So the overview of the Freelance to Founder calculator is that this one is designed specifically for freelancers who want to understand what they need to charge to hit their income goals. Now, in my opinion, it's very clean, straightforward, and it walks you through the key variables that affect your pricing. It does certain things very well. For instance, it definitely gives you comprehensive inputs in that it asks for your desired annual salary, your business expenses, your tax rate, your billable hours per week, your weeks worked per year, and your profit margin. This gives you a holistic view of what you need to charge. Additionally, it gives a clear breakdown. So after you input your numbers, it shows you your required hourly rate and breaks down exactly where that number comes from. Salary, expenses, taxes, profit, all those things that we mentioned. It also takes into account a profit margin consideration. Now, this is a somewhat unique feature to this calculator. Some calculators do not do this. This one specifically asks about your desired profit margin, which can be important if you're thinking about reinvesting in your business or scaling. The other plus is it's easy to use. The interface is simple and intuitive, it's easy to understand, and I don't think that you're going to need a tutorial to figure this one out. Now, as everything, this also has some drawbacks. There is a limited amount of customization that you can do. You can't dig deeper into specific expense categories or adjust for variable income months. It's basically a high-level calculator, not a detailed financial planning tool. Also, there's no project rate calculation. Now, for some of you, this is not going to be a drawback because you may not calculate your rates that way. However, if you do, that could be a problem. This one only gives you an hourly rate. So if you do charge by the project, you're going to need to do some additional math on the side to translate that hourly rate into project pricing. The other factor to consider is that it has you manually enter your tax rate. So you have to estimate your own tax rate, which I know that some of you are well aware of. This is not going to be a problem. But for some folks, this can be tricky if you're not sure which bracket you fall into or what your self-employment tax is going to be. Overall, I'd say that this website is best for freelancers who want a quick, reliable, hourly rate calculation, and for folks who are comfortable doing some additional math to apply it to their specific pricing model. The second freelance calculator for you to check out is the Virtual Headquarters Freelance Rate Calculator. I know, it's a mouthful, but it does offer a freelance rate calculator that's geared toward helping you determine a sustainable hourly rate based on your living expenses, business costs, and desired work schedule. So what does this one do well? Well, in my opinion, it does give you a nice detailed expense breakdown. The calculator asks you to input specific living expenses, such as your rent, your food, your utilities, your insurance, and then your business expenses separately, which gives you a more granular understanding of what you're actually covering with your rate. It also accounts for unpaid time off, basically that vacation and sick time that we were discussing. And this is critical for freelancers who often forget to factor that in, but we all need and deserve some time off. Additionally, it can calculate your billable versus your total hours. So the calculator distinguishes between the hours worked and the hours billed, which is one of the most important and often overlooked factors in freelance pricing. Now, the visual results are also a positive in my opinion. The output's clean, easy to read, and it shows your minimum hourly rate and breaks it down by category, which does provide some valuable insight. Now, of course, just like all of the other ones, this one does have its drawbacks. There's no profit margin. So unlike the Freelance 2 founder calculator, this one doesn't ask about your desired profit. So it is really giving you a break-even rate rather than a rate that allows for business growth. Additionally, this one is very US-centric, which is not a disadvantage if you're located within the US. But for those of you who are not located in the US, this may not be the website for you because the default currency and tax assumptions are built around the US market. So if you're freelancing internationally, you may need to do some adjustments manually. Additionally, there's no project or retainer options. Just like the first calculator that we mentioned, this one only outputs an hourly rate. So you'll need to translate that into other pricing models yourself if you do not follow our hourly pricing. So overall, I think that this one's best for freelancers who want a detailed breakdown of their expenses and a realistic minimum hourly rate that covers their costs, especially for those freelancers who are just starting out and really need to understand their baseline. The third option is the calculator.net salary calculator. Now, this one is more of a general salary calculator. It's not necessarily specifically designed for freelancers. So it's typically used to convert between hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, and annual salary figures, or to calculate take-home pay after taxes. So what it does do very well are those versatile conversions. So if you know your desired annual income and you want to see what that translates to on an hourly, weekly, or monthly basis, this tool does make it easy for those conversions to happen. Additionally, it does give the tax withholding estimates. So based on your income, it can estimate your take-home pay after federal and state taxes, which is very helpful for understanding what you'll actually pocket. It also handles multiple scenarios well. As freelancers, we aren't always sure what our environment is going to look like from day to day. So this tool does allow you to quickly test different salary amounts and see how they break down across different time periods. Now, the drawback of this one is one that I already mentioned, that it's not freelance specific. This calculator doesn't account for things like business expenses that we can deduct, the self-employment tax, the unbillable time, or any other factors that we previously mentioned that make freelance pricing different from that of a salaried employee. It also has some limited usefulness for rate setting, in my opinion. To me, it's more of a conversion tool than a pricing strategy tool. It won't help you to figure out what to charge. It just shows you what a given salary breaks down to. And this one also assumes consistent income for the most part. And freelancers rarely have consistent paychecks. So again, this tool is more geared toward salary workers, so it doesn't give that variability and gaps that happen with freelance income. So I think this one's best for freelancers who already know their target hourly or annual rate and just need to convert it into different time periods, or maybe those freelancers who want a quick estimate of take-home pay after taxes, but it's definitely not ideal for setting your initial rates. And then finally, there's the W-2 versus 1099 calculator. This one is a good one because it's specifically designed to help you compare W-2 employment, which would be that traditional employee status, versus a 1099 contractor or that freelance compensation. So it's incredibly useful if you are deciding whether to go freelance or if you're negotiating a contract rate and want to know what its equivalent is in terms of a salaried position. So what does it do well? Well, obviously it does that direct comparison well. It shows you exactly what a W-2 salaried employee is worth in 1099 terms or vice versa. This is huge when you're deciding whether a freelance rate is actually better than staying as a full-time employee. It also accounts for benefits. It factors in things like the employee paid benefits that we were mentioning, such as health insurance, retirement contributions, payroll taxes, and that ever so important paid time off. All of the things that you basically lose when you decide to go freelance. Additionally, it will give you tax differences. It highlights the self-employment tax burden, which is generally about 15% on top of the income tax that freelancers carry. And many people don't realize that this tax exists until they get their first tax bill. It also has very simple inputs. Basically, you just enter your W-2 salary or your 1099 rate, and this calculator does the rest. Now, it does obviously have some drawbacks. It doesn't set your rate. This tool is basically a comparison tool. It's not for figuring out what to charge from scratch. So if you need to do that, one of the other tools might be best for you. You need to already have a salary or rate in mind to be able to use this website. It also has limited customization options with regards to expenses. While it accounts for major benefits, it doesn't let you input your specific business expenses, your software costs, and basically any freelance overhead that you have. This one is also U.S. tax focused. Like many of the other calculators that we mentioned, it's built around the U.S. tax structure. So this is fine for my U.S. freelance friends, but my international freelance friends may need to adjust. I think that this one's really best for freelancers who are transitioning from W-2 employment and want a better grasp of what their salary translates to as a freelance rate, or similarly, maybe freelancers who are being offered a contract and want to know if it's actually competitive compared to their traditional job. So of course, it may be to your advantage to use these calculators together. You could always, for instance, use one to help you find that baseline hourly rate based on your expenses, your desired income, and your billable hours. And then you could use that rate to input into one of the other calculators to compare that freelance rate to the rate with a W-2 job. Obviously, there are a lot of possibilities on what you can do here. But the point of this whole post is really that it is advised to use these tools because too many freelancers underprice themselves, either because they don't realize how much they need to cover with their expenses and taxes, or because they're afraid of scaring clients away with high prices. But here's the thing. If your rate doesn't realistically cover your costs and leave room for savings, growth, sustainability, all of those things, you're not really running a business. You're subsidizing your clients and sacrificing your own financial health. The freelance calculator should give you the data to set rates that actually work. They should remove the guesswork and the guilt. They can show you in black and white what you need to charge to build a freelance career that's financially viable. So while you do not have to use these numbers as your final rates, they're definitely going to be starting points for you. And you should know what your starting point or your baseline is. That is important to a successful freelance future. And it helps you to realize exactly what you're covering or what you're not covering if you're considering saying yes to a project. So in summary, I feel like these freelance calculators are essential tools for setting rates and that they support your life and your business. So whether you're brand new to freelancing or you've been at it for years and think that you may not be charging correctly, then I recommend running your numbers through one or several of these calculators to see what you get. It's a smart move. Use these tools and know your numbers so that you can make sure that you're charging what you are worth, because that is what you need. Your financial stability moving forward as a freelancer depends on it. If this was helpful to you, please do like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it, and I hope to see you on the next one. Take care. Bye.